Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington, where it's move-in week on our state's flagship university campus. Wide-eyed freshmen curiously navigate their new surroundings and, in many cases, their first taste of independence. Local businesses welcome the return of their customer base. The hopeful excitement of a new football season fills the air with electricity. But just below the surface, a battle for the very soul of our state's institutions of higher learning is being fought. The Trump regime, the Braun administration, and university leadership alike are increasingly restricting academic and expressive freedom on the state's college campuses, public and private alike. Though this process has picked up steam since this January's inaugurations, it is part of a larger right-wing crackdown on learning since 2021 and a continued evolution of a greater reactionary backlash against education that has persisted in this country since at least the 1950s. The current battle in this war for our minds began in the aftermath of 2020's historic Black Lives Matter protests, when far-right operatives like Christopher Rufo coalesced around woke ideology in education and business as the boogeyman du jour. Rhetoric and fear-mongering gave way to legislation and policy, with state legislators picking up the mantle and imposing their retrograde views on the academy. From the elimination of DEI programs to the erosion of tenure protection, from the diminution of shared governance to the trampling of free speech rights, from stacking the Board of Trustees with lackeys to posting snipers on campus rooftops, liberally tossing around anti-Semitism accusations and arresting faculty members, Hoosier Republicans and their hatchet men and women are well down the road to complete control of our state's university systems. But not if the educators can help it. The American Association of University Professors, quote, advances academic freedom and shared governance, defines professional values and standards, promotes the economic security of those who teach and research in higher education, organizes to make these goals a reality, and ensures high education's contribution to the common good. The Bloomington chapter has pursued the national mission at Indiana University for over a century, and Executive Committee President David McDonald has been on the front line of the war for academic freedom. A professor of folklore and ethnomusicology by trade, he found himself at the center of this battle when, in April of 2024, he was arrested during a peaceful protest against Israel's war on Gaza and subsequently handed a one-year ban from campus. The charges and the ban were later dismissed, but the fight against administrative overreach continues. McDonald is my guest this week, and in the following conversation, we'll talk about the role of the AAUP, the importance of tenure protection, and the many ways this bulwark has been chipped away at on Indiana's campuses. We'll look at the attacks coming from university administration as well as from the state legislature and governor's office, discussing what effects they have on his and his colleagues' teaching and research, as well as the consequences for students and alumni. Real quick, before we get to the interview, please consider supporting Who's Left with a paid subscription. This is an independent media project. I don't paywall content, and I don't rely on advertising. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Maybe I could make more money if I did things differently, but I refuse to gatekeep valuable information in the middle of a political crisis. So please, if you find value in this work, go to whosleft.us and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help me write more, research more, and organize more. Not ready for long-term commitment? You can make a one-time contribution on Cash App or Venmo. Links are in the show notes. Me and my old body would like to spend less time on construction and more time constructing a better future for Indiana, but I need your financial support to do so. And if that doesn't work for your budget at this time, you can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding articles to your people. We are building a community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, X, TikTok, Mastodon, and YouTube at Who's Left. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Thanks again. Now, here's my conversation with Dr. David McDonald. David McDonald, welcome to the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I really appreciate you joining me today. So, so you are with the AAUP. That's the American Association of University Professors at IU. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, yourself? I assume AAUP is not your first gig at the university. You're probably actually a professor first. So, what do you profess about?
Sure. So I've been a professor here at IU for going on 17 years. I'm a professor in the folklore and ethnomusicology department. I'm an anthropologist who studies music and sound, and in particular, the way music and sound are used for political purposes around the world. So I teach a lot of classes here at IU on protest songs, on social movements, social justice, and the ways in which communities will use music and sound both to commit acts of violence and to ameliorate acts of violence. That's what I write about.
That is fascinating and sounds like it could be an episode of its own. And I would like to pursue that in the future. It sounds fantastic. But that is not why we're here today. We're here today to discuss the ongoing attack on higher education coming from the Braun administration here in Indiana, and more broadly the Trump regime, Project 2025, and the general authoritarian movement that we're living under. So, what role does the AAUP play, both here at IU and nationally, in responding to these attacks on education, monitoring the different places, coordinating? What do you folks do?
So the AAUP is a national organization of university professors that includes tenure track, non-tenure track, graduate students. Anyone who teaches on a university campus is a part of the AAUP organization. And the AAUP is affiliated with collective bargaining units and unions. And it has chapters at, I believe, about 500 chapters nationwide on college and university campuses. Some of those are what we would call bargaining units, meaning they are fully recognized unions and union chapters, empowered to collectively bargain on behalf of faculty. And other chapters are what we would call advisory units. And those are not recognized as bargaining units, but nevertheless represent faculty interests, and in particular represent faculty as they navigate issues of academic freedom. So the IUB chapter of AAUP is an advisory unit rather than a bargaining unit, but it is one that takes very seriously protecting measures of academic freedom over and protecting faculty in the classrooms on the IU campus.
Okay, fantastic. And I assume the difference between the bargaining units and the non-bargaining units comes down to like right to work states and which places it's easier to unionize or whatnot. Again, yeah, one of those things that we've come back to here frequently
Yes,
on the
that is
podcast.
correct.
But all of these uh, attacks on collective action seem to be organized in some way, you know?
Yes, that's correct. Indiana has many laws on the books that make it very difficult, if not impossible, for a union chapter such as ours to be fully recognized.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds that's about par for the course for Indiana. So, you mentioned the different groups of folks that kind of come under the AAUP's purview, I guess, and you mentioned like tenure track and non-tenure track. And not everybody here is steeped in the language of academia. What is tenure, and why is it so important?
Okay, that's a really important question. So tenure is the bedrock of academic freedom on university campuses. Basically, what ends up happening at Research One universities or at universities in general that have tenure stream faculty is that after about a 6 year probationary period, a tenure track faculty member will go up for tenure and promotion. And at that moment in their career, all of their research, teaching, and service is assessed relative to the promotion guidelines of that particular institution. If a faculty member has met or exceeded those expectations for tenure, they are awarded tenure and promotion to an associate professorship with tenure. And tenure basically offers protections for that faculty member from being terminated or their employment being at risk for their research or teaching that they conduct. So, a tenured faculty member can, of course, be fired for a number of reasons, but their
Sure.
firing must go through a due process that involves faculty oversight and faculty review so as to prevent faculty who do research on potentially controversial topics from being fired simply for the politics of what they study and what they teach in the classroom. So, for example, tenure protections would protect a climatologist from doing their work against being fired against someone who denies climate change as a viable scientific mode of inquiry. It might also protect someone who works in areas of gender studies and or communities that are vulnerable in society, who political forces may wish not to be discussed on a college campus. It offers protections for the research and teaching that faculty members conduct. It's a way of ensuring academic freedom in the classroom on university campuses. Um, so, for example, my entire career, I have spent doing research now 25 years in Palestine with Palestinian refugee communities in the West Bank, in Israel, in Jordan, and Syria and Lebanon. That work is largely on the role of music and activism and the way that Palestinians have used music to communicate their desires, their political desires for a nation state. That work, with the protections of tenure, allows me to publish my work and teach my work without fear of being fired for the political nature of the work that I conduct, at least when it is respected. When tenure is not respected, when it is weakened, all of a sudden the research that faculty members conduct across the university in the hard sciences and in the humanities becomes vulnerable to political influence.
Okay. Yeah, very good, very important. And now it is my understanding, in the last several years here in Indiana, we've seen attacks from the state government on the institution of tenure. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely, that's correct. And it's more than just the state government. We've seen attacks on tenure coming from inside the House, from IU administration itself. So,
Mm.
in this particular moment, and it's just been in the last 3 years that we can isolate these direct and coordinated, organized even attacks on tenure protections across Indiana state universities, but in particular at IU.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about those things. Let's see. 3 years ago, that takes us back to like 2022, or is this like the 2023 session, maybe? Or, but anyway, again, this is just the last 3 years, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Wow. So, well, where does this last era of whittling protections begin? I guess.
Well, there are a couple different ways we could triangulate this project. One might begin with the ways in which pro-Palestinian conversation on campus was thwarted by the IU administration. The canceling of Miko Peled's talk with the Palestine Solidarity Committee, the sanctioning and suspending of a tenured professor for attempting to facilitate an open conversation on Palestine on campus, the canceling of the Samia Halaby art exhibition at the Eskenazi Museum, and then following immediately after the arrests of 53 faculty and students in Dunmeadow at the Palestine encampment. Those were all attacks on academic freedom that occurred within the House, so to speak. Uh, Coupled with that, we have the passage of SEA 202, which is a state legislation that demanded all Indiana University Board of Trustees to adopt measures that provide for or guarantee creating a culture of intellectual diversity in the classroom and making sure that any faculty who do not foster a culture of intellectual diversity within the classroom be either terminated, demoted, or have their salary drastically docked. All of those things were distinct and organized attempts to neutralize academic freedom at Indiana University, all coming from different places.
Wow. Okay. So I guess let's set aside the call from inside the house for a
Okay.
moment and come back to that one. But looking at SEA 202, what I guess what elements of that affect your day-to-day preparation as a professor?
Right. So SEA 202 demands that Board of Trustees create a system which will ensure that faculty foster a culture of intellectual diversity in the classroom. Okay. And while it does define intellectual diversity as multiple, divergent, and varied scholarly perspectives on a range of policy issues, it does not define what counts as sufficiently fostering such a culture of free inquiry and free expression. And it doesn't actually say which diverse opinions, which diverse perspectives, scholarly or not, should be included in order to sufficiently meet this criteria. It's intentionally vague. And in fact, the state senator who wrote the bill um, publicly said I left it vague on purpose in order to prevent faculty from indoctrinating our students in the classroom with woke ideology. So
Uh,
the law
yeah.
itself was created from the right specifically to um, uh, control the content of university classrooms and to basically chill the speech of professors who work in areas that might be considered controversial. So, what this means is that every 5 years, a tenured faculty member must be reviewed on this particular statute, and they have to sufficiently demonstrate that they have fostered a culture of intellectual diversity in their classroom. But no one really knows how one would do that. Okay. So IU has been trying to figure out how they can ensure this. And what they did is they created a system where literally anyone on the planet could anonymously make a formal complaint against a faculty member saying that they were not providing sufficient intellectual diversity in the classroom. And then that complaint would be adjudicated by the administration. And then, if found to be warranted, would go and involve a sanction to that faculty member, which could, of course, lead to their termination, demotion, or loss of salary.
There's a bunch there. Just just first of all, yeah, the vagueness, right? This definitely sounds like it is setting up mechanisms by which to persecute whoever the university administration or the state government, whoever they don't like. Well, now we have a reason to go after them, and it's vague enough that you could apply it to anybody. Also, there's this mechanism for reporting. You don't have to even prove that you're a student who was in one of these classes and who was harmed. We see how you could purchase a bot network to do this for you if you wanted to. I mean, we live
Yes,
in that era now. But you mentioned this 5-year tenure review. That doesn't that defeat the purpose of tenure? Like that's tenure's about not having to go through these reviews all the time.
that's exactly right. And so it nullifies tenure through a content based structure. So it basically says that regardless of your tenure status, you could still be fired based on the content of your teaching in the classroom. Right? And so it largely eliminates tenure protections altogether. And it goes even further. So the system that IU adopted allows for any IU employee to make such a complaint. So someone who's never seen me teach, has never met me, has never been in my classroom, or even looked at any part of my class could make one of these complaints very easily, submit it either anonymously or signed with their name. And it would require the university to now conduct an investigation into my teaching practices to ensure that I have met the statutes of SCA 202. That, in and of itself, just the act of investigation or the threat of investigation, has a chilling effect on faculty members in the classroom.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Are you seeing your colleagues already pulling punches, maybe not saying things that they believe, things that are true, things that science purports to be true? Are they holding back because they fear persecution from the state or from the university administration's office?
Absolutely. I can speak for myself. I have definitely taken adoptive measures to try and protect myself from SCA 202. I have changed the readings that I'm teaching. I've changed the structure of my course. I eliminate a lot of discussion in the classroom because if a discussion kind of ventures into a political or controversial field, a student could make a complaint about me relative to the conversation that was taking in the classroom. So the other thing that I've done, and this is by recommendation of the College of Arts and Sciences, I record all of my classes now so that if anyone were to make a complaint, I now have a recording of exactly what was said in that room at that time. They also asked us to insert intellectual diversity statements on our syllabus. Um, these kinds of things are all meant to try and protect faculty from potential sanction. But of course, none of them offer the kind of protections that we would normally have under simple academic freedom standards of tenure.
This whole intellectual diversity thing, I put scare quotes around it because look, I'm coming at this from an overtly political lens. I know you may have to be delicate with your words sometimes, but I'm not. So what I see with this is elevating, and they gave away the game when they talk about woke indoctrination, right? They
Right.
is elevating hate speech to be valid in the classroom, to make uh, unscientific speech just as valid as scientific findings in the classroom. Like, can you go into a biology classroom and purport that all of man evolved from like two people and we survived a flood on an ark some several thousand years ago? Like, no, the archaeological records don't point to that being true, and we have all this data and data, and no, you can't be corrected on that now. I see this thing going potentially all kinds of sideways.
You're exactly right. So there's nothing in this law that someone that says a student or any employee could create a complaint against a faculty member for not including creationism in their biology class. um, or any other form of understanding of the universe in a science class, because there is no definition here of what counts as intellectually diverse and what counts as sufficiently providing multiple views and perspectives. Um, so the ACLU took up this case and brought together representatives from the four major colleges, public colleges at IU, myself, colleagues at IU Indianapolis, Purdue, and Fort Wayne, and we contested this through a lawsuit. And each of us teaches in a field where intellectual diversity in this scenario, multiple and varied perspectives could be compelled forms of speech. So, for example, I work in Palestine. So, does that mean that I now have to teach that the absolutely fallacious idea that Palestinians don't exist or that they weren't subjected to settler colonialism beginning in 1948 until today, as many Zionist Israeli scholars purport incorrectly. One of the other plaintiffs, he works on the history of enslaved populations in the South. Does he now have to teach the varied perspective that slavery in some way benefited enslaved populations because it provided them with job skills and job training, which is another
You were about to say
ridiculous
that talking about this
scholarly
stuff in
perspective?
Florida. Yeah.
Exactly. Another one of the plaintiffs, he works on the Holocaust. Is he now bound to teach Holocaust denialism? And then the fourth plaintiff, he works particularly on the history of queer and gay communities in the US. Is this professor now compelled to teach varied, multiple scholarly perspectives that deny or dismiss the appearance, presence, or even life ways of gay, transgendered folks in the United States? So the law, as it's written, could lead very clearly to these issues of compelled speech. And in particular, it could sanction, terminate, demote, or deny the faculty members who are in the classrooms doing this research.
I thought having these difficult discussions and hashing things out in this, marketplace of ideas or whatnot was the whole point of going to college. Like, can't having your worldview challenged is the point of college. At least I thought it used to be. Now it seems like it's glorified, very expensive job training.
Yeah. I think you're really getting somewhere with that point. IU and under its current administration is significantly moving its teaching and service missions towards these kinds of job training and industry related competencies rather than research, critical analysis, critical thinking, and social and cultural research. It's attempting to completely hamstring, if not silence, the kind of critical humanities that deal with these kinds of topics, and instead seeing IU, the preeminent research institution of the state, as merely a place for students to receive job training skills that could be applied in corporate, capitalist, and in this case, defense area environments.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, like there's a place for this. There's a place for vocational training. I mean, like that's what Ivy Tech's for. There's a place for STEM. That is what Purdue exists to do. But IU is meant to be a university in the classical sense where like the pursuit of knowledge and learning for knowledge and learning's sake is the goal.
Yeah. So the state senator who put this together, Spencer, he basically said this law was written to prevent a math professor from talking about immigration in the classroom. Right. That's what he said. That was his big example. Like, if you're a math teacher, you should be just teaching math. You shouldn't show up and start pontificating about immigration in your math class. And that sounds rather rational. You know what? Yeah, that makes sense to me. However, the way that this is written and the way that it's been applied, it has
Yeah.
only been applied to target faculty who specifically discuss Palestine in the classroom. Nowhere else have the complaints been levied on this campus. Only two faculty on this campus have actually been subjected to these complaints, and both of them work specifically on issues of Palestine.
Yeah, can you talk about your colleagues who have actually seen consequences from this bill, from this
So
law now? Yeah.
most recently, my colleague, Dr. Ben Robinson in Germanic Studies, was formally sanctioned as a result of an anonymous complaint submitted through the Office of Institutional Equity, which then got escalated to an SCA 202 complaint by the administration. And then it went through a review process. And even though the complaint was anonymous, even though the complainant was never actually uh, uh, considered, never were they kind of consulted on the complaint. That complaint resulted in a sanction against my colleague for what the complainant described was an excessive discussion of Israel and excessive critique of IU administration in the classroom. Now, mind you, this was a class in Germanic studies that was on Germanic thought, academic freedom, and the free speech in these areas. And here, the professor was using his personal experience as an activist to discuss these issues. But a student found it to be excessive. And because an anonymous student found it to be excessive, the administration found it to be excessive without consulting any of the other students. The rest of the class might have felt nothing was excessive without actually talking to the complainant themselves or even identifying them to find out what exactly happened. All of this was done in such a way that my colleague was never given the opportunity to fully refute the complaint made against them, nor were they ever able to define what excessive means. Is excessive saying something twice a semester or 12 times a semester? What counts as excessive critique in a class that deals with free speech?
The irony
The
is
irony.
so thick, so
Yeah.
thick. Well, so this sanction that is kind of an internal university sanction, or is that a state level thing?
So it's an internal sanction that will live in the professor's personnel file and then be used the next time they go up for a 5-year review for SCA 202 and could then be used to dismiss, terminate, or demote them as a result.
Ah, lovely. So, well, that I guess that brings me to back to the call inside the house, and the folks who were levying these sanctions. It sounds like the professors, the faculty there at the university, have a storied history with Pam Whitten, going back further than just these last couple years, I believe. But boy, I remember, several years ago, maybe long since I left IU, but um, as an alumni, we were proud that we had a really highly ranked university that was one of the crown jewels of public universities in this country, and we would make fun of like Ohio State and their president Gordon Gee, who was basically a hatchet man there to prop up the football program and nothing else. And then he moved on to West Virginia and did a hatchet job there. It seems like we've got our own hatchet person in Pam Whitten here, whose job is to gut the institutions of this once proud university.
So, what's interesting is faculty were really excited about her presidency when she was first hired. Faculty across the board were really excited for a new leadership and new administration. And then we started to learn the how President Whitten was hired. We found out that the faculty search committee and their recommendations were completely disregarded by the board of trustees. All of their ranked candidates that they put forward were completely ignored. And in back channels, back room negotiating, they came up with Pam Whitten as their candidate and nominee. And she never actually went through the search process that any of the other candidates went through. So it was a behind the scenes backdoor hiring that faculty were never consulted. And then we come to find out that after she assumes the position, there were questions about plagiarism in her dissertation and in her research, questions of
I guess another
unethical
one just came
behavior.
up.
That's right. Questions of really questionable leadership decisions that she made in her previous positions as provost and president of Kennesaw State. All of these things started coming, and then we started to realize that maybe this isn't the leader that we thought. Um, then we have, of course, these attacks on academic freedom and Indiana University's over compliance with these laws in order to further restrict and confine intellectual inquiry on campus. Now we have, of course, these recent policies that were just snuck into state law legislation in the middle of the night, HEA 1001, where the Board of Trustees is no longer under any kind of electoral
Yeah.
presence, where faculty governance is now only advisory in all cases. Um, and where faculty now have to go under 5-year productivity reviews in addition to their 5-year SEA 202 reviews. All of that Governor Braun let slip was at the behest of Pam Whitten. Governor Braun, in an interview, said,
Oh,
yeah, Pam
really?
Whitten wanted to get her house in order, so to speak. And so these measures were put forward to be put into state legislation to help get this university back in order. And that also included demanding the changing of 116 degree programs at Indiana University. So all of these changes came without consulting faculty, without considering faculty, without even considering students or alumni as well. They were
No.
all jammed into state legislation in the last minute, in the middle of the night. And now we are left trying to pick up the pieces as a result.
So, yeah, it sounds like she wasn't hired so much as installed by the governor. And this what how long has Dr. Witten been at IU now?
This is, I believe, the third year. This is the beginning of the fourth year, something like that. I mean, it lines up perfectly with her administration, all of these changes.
So she's not been around terribly long. She's been here from uh the get-go, a let's say it. She's a Republican plant here to impose their will on the way this university is governed. And eh, boy, if she wasn't, maybe she would push. If she was like a real academic, right? She would go to the mat for academic freedom. She would push back on the governor, on the state legislature when they put these policies in place. And at best, she, plays matador defense. But yeah, at worst, she's the one calling for this garbage. That's insane to me.
Yeah, any administrator, any researcher, any scholar in higher education, any scholar worth their credibility has always had at least some idea of the essential nature of academic freedom. We can disagree on politics, we can disagree on pedagogy, on administration, on all of these different things, yes, but at its core, if we don't have academic freedom, then the entire system of inquiry, of scholarship, completely falls apart. It no longer has any credibility. And that's the thing that I've never quite understood. I had always just, fully believed that, or while I might disagree with administration and their practices, that at least there's a firewall for intellectual inquiry and scholarship and academic freedom, right? But when we see that these kinds of directly targeted attacks on academic freedom are happening on campus, things like canceling an art exhibit, and the
Yeah.
art exhibit is abstract paintings by one of the most world renowned and famous female painters of the world, who happened to get her MFA here in the 1960s and was the first ever female professor of art at Yale University, who has been celebrated with the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in Arts in her lifetime. When that exhibition and her homecoming to Bloomington is canceled simply because she's Palestinian, that's when I really lost hope that our administrators had that same firewall of what counts as scholarship and intellectual freedom.
And now this is a change, if I recall. Well, we looked at things, recent developments. We had the ramming through of all new trustees, um, and they're all appointed by the governor, right? That used to be six were appointed by the governor, and three were chosen by alumni. I want to say,
So
but
it was 5 were appointed by the governor, 3 were elected by the Alumni Association, and 1 was a student elected by the
that's right.
student body.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, we can talk about, so even before, the majority was going to be governor elected. Gubernatorial control over board of trustees has been there from the beginning. If the governor
Right.
appoints
Right.
5, he's got a majority, or she's got a majority, whoever the governor is, it doesn't really matter. This is something completely different, what just happened. Now, all of these positions are appointed by the governor. right? But more important than that, they serve at the leisure of the governor and can be replaced at any time without serving their full term. So before it was a 3-year term. If the governor got elected and they didn't like who the trustees were, they had to
Yeah.
wait until their term was up to replace them. Under this new law, the governor could literally replace the entire slate of board of trustees the night before an election or board of trustees meeting is about to take place and install an entirely new set of trustees to fully provide compliance or obedience to what the governor is demanding. So it's more than simply appointing everyone on the board. It's now none of those board of trustees, none of those trustees could ever cross the governor or express their own opinion without risking being immediately replaced that day. So it's an
So
entire
yeah.
takeover of the board of trustees that we've never seen before.
And the board of trustees is technically like the group that oversees all of IU. Like
That's
they
right.
hire the president of the university and are responsible for the day to day operations. Was the governor appointing the majority of the board always the case, or if you roll back to, oh boy, the post World War II era, when you think of like Herman B. Wells and the IU growing and becoming the great university we think of it being, like weren't things not just here but most of your universities like run by faculty?
So that is an interesting question. Now, the makeup of the board of trustees is beyond my historical knowledge. However,
Sure.
in the 20 years that I've been here, it has always been the governor appointing five, three elected by alumni, and one student trustee elected by the student body. But your other point is an interesting one in the sense of what role do faculty play in all of these issues? And what we see is that in matters of the curriculum, academics, programs, degree requirements, all of those things, faculty had what was called legislative authority, meaning faculty decided. The administration could not create curricular or academic scholarly degree program type changes without faculty approval. So the faculty are the experts. We have the PhDs. We are the people who teach the classes. We are the ones who should decide what it takes to get a degree in biology, for example. In other matters of the university, the faculty had advisory authority rather than legislative authority.
Sure.
But even in those instances, the faculty had to be consulted on aspects of major policy changes in the university. Faculty governance, it was a shared governance model. So it wasn't faculty governance, it was shared governance between faculty and administration. This most recent law that was squeezed into an appropriations bill in the middle of the night without any consultation or public discussion now changes that and has said specifically that faculty can only have advisory authority and cannot have legislative authority in all aspects of the university. So this one bill that was snuck in the middle of the night has now eliminated shared governance on this campus and made it so that the administration no longer has to consult or even get the approval of faculty to make changes to any aspect of the university administration.
Wow. Yeah. So, man, you'd think the education if you look at things the way Republicans look at things through this like business lens, the education is the product you're selling. You'd think you'd want the people who are experts in that product deciding how the product should be made, not you know
So the way I
like a
like to say
Beckwith
it,
or somebody who knows nothing, right? Like
exactly. Scott, the way I say it is no one has ever come to IU because they have great administrators.
well, the irony is, like, and I think, again, this is another one of those areas where the right likes to shit on universities because, oh, there's so many administrators and this and that. Well, y'all put them there.
So
Um,
if we look at IU's reputation, its standing, its rankings, the reasons why students choose to come here, and if we ranked them, the quality of the faculty would be near the top. The quality of the administration would be nowhere on the list, right? People come to IU because of the faculty more so than they do about the administration. Nobody comes to IU because of their administrators. They come to IU because of their amazing faculty as both scholars, researchers, and teachers.
yeah, and so you'd think you'd want those folks in charge of the thing that they are the experts on. It's loony. It's loony. But so now they're not consulting the faculty. The faculty has an advisory role. Maybe they'll listen to you. And they have complete freedom to overhaul departments and whatnot. And I guess they just did. So tell
Yeah.
me about that and how that is affecting you and your colleagues.
So there have been two different policies that have changed quite dramatically as a result of HEA 1001. The first is now what they are calling low enrolling degree programs. If you do not meet certain degree thresholds, those degree programs have to be either consolidated, merged, or eliminated. Um, what's interesting though is their metric for deciding which departments or degrees are vulnerable is based on the number of bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and PhD degrees that are awarded annually. However, it doesn't take into account the actual credit hours that that degree
Mm,
program might actually teach. So, for example, my Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology, we fell below the threshold for the undergraduate degree, but not the graduate degrees. But the thing is, so while we do not have um, 15 bachelor's degrees awarded every year, we do teach 10,000 credit hours each year to undergraduates across campus. In fact, we teach more credit hours to undergrads across campus than any other department in the college except for Spanish and Portuguese. And that's because Spanish and Portuguese are very popular language requirements that students want to take. So while we may not award a lot of degrees, we teach a ton of students. Okay. Nevertheless, they are labeling us low enrolling, a low enrolling
mm.
degree program. We're not low enrolling. In fact, our courses are sold out with waiting lists every single semester. Nevertheless, we are now in a process of having to consolidate or merge our degree in order to make these thresholds work. So, Indiana University submitted 116 degree programs that were going to be affected by
Wow.
this particular legislation. Purdue, they submitted 7. Why would IU have 116? Why would Purdue have 7? It's because uh, the administration is what decides which degrees can receive exemptions and which degrees can't. And our administration has basically said, don't even try for an exemption. We're not going to grant it. Right. Whereas Purdue was taking care of all of this in house. So we have our administration over complying once again to a state legislation designed to target Indiana University, and in particular, those degree programs that provide the most training in critical thinking and critical analysis, the humanities, the social sciences. These are the targeted programs, the languages, for example. IU's amazing reputation and ranking in the world is largely based on the language programs that we support here. You can study languages here at IU that you cannot study anywhere else in the country. And now we are shuttering or merging together these language programs into umbrella degrees at the expense of our reputation and ranking.
Wow. Yeah, man. They're actively trying again looking at it through a product lens, right? As a commodity. They're making their product worse. Um not and not, not through any fault of the faculty. Y'all are trying as hard as you can, but they're cutting you. They're making you jump through a million hoops. They won't let you teach the way you've been trained to teach. They won't let you teach your area of expertise. Um, what good, and this is what I worry about as an alumnus, and I'm sure other alumni worry about as well, that's going to cheapen our degrees.
Yes.
That makes an IU degree worth less because, gee, we might as well have gone. No offense to West Virginia, I'm sure you're lovely people there, but we might as well have gone to West Virginia.
So what's interesting to me is Governor Braun said that undergraduate students were overwhelmed with the choices of majors at IU, and it was because of that overwhelm that we needed to streamline our offerings so that students had a much more clear understanding of what it is they were going to be studying. Okay, but in the process, now a student who came here to study history, for example, or philosophy or classics or anything like that would now have to get an umbrella degree in general humanities, right? Or history, languages, and cultures, or heritage. And so it's a very general and diffuse
Mm,
uh, uh, title that will be on their degree, making their degree less legible when they go on the job market. When they go on the job market, they're going to look at this degree and say, I have no idea what this is, because we're making the degree and the program, the product, as you pointed out, we're making it illegible on the job market because we've now combined so many
yeah.
degrees together into a general umbrella humanities, general humanities degree.
Yes, like, what the hell did you even study there? Why should I
Exactly.
hire you, right, if you wanted to look at it through that way. And like you said, it's no coincidence that they are cutting the programs that, develop critical thinking skills.
Right.
It
So those critical disciplines that take a look at society critically, or history society critically, or culture critically, the ones that point out and really work towards alleviating a lot of the violence of the world, those are the ones that are being harmed. Those are the ones that are being targeted. And so we see underlying all of this an effort to kind of silence critical thought on society, and in particular, the policies of, for example, the current administration. Now, in my work, I actually am equally critical of all of the presidential administrations and the government policies, but in this case, we're actually seeing a targeting of faculty in order to protect and stifle debate on the current politics of our administration.
and that's particularly dangerous. So, we're coming up on the end here, so I guess that's where I wanna focus our remaining time. If we continue at the current rate, what does IU look like 10, 20 years from now?
That's a really good question. I hope we never find out. I hope that we are able to insert some sense into this conversation and reinstall academic freedom and rethink the way that higher education um, is pursued here in Indiana. The other option is we eliminate critical thinking, we eliminate research, we eliminate or dilute the power of our faculty as scholars. We sanitize the classroom from any kind of critical thinking or debate, and we ultimately only pursue what might be considered job training skills for military defense and other forms of corporate commerce in society. And that would be an incredible loss to the state of Indiana and, in particular, to the students of Indiana. And this is why the AAUP, we believe, is so incredibly important at this moment. If faculty governance is now advisory, the only mechanism we have left for faculty to leverage these types of attacks is through collective bargaining and collective organization. And we believe that right now the AAUP is the most logical and effective tool for attempting to reclaim um, faculty governance, or at least shared governance on this campus.
And so I guess my final question is, if alumni, students, sports fans, people who love IU, if you're concerned about the state of this university and the direction it's going, what can we do to push things in a different direction?
Normally, I would say write letters to the president and provost and chancellor of this campus. I don't actually say that anymore. I actually think those letters would be best received by being sent directly to the board of trustees themselves, or to the governor. In that sense, kind of reclaiming Indiana University's credibility as a research university and reclaiming the importance of tenure protections and academic freedom in the classroom as a means to save this university from complete political takeover. I honestly think that for alumni who are concerned about this institution, they should be very vocal about their donations or withholding their donations to IU until changes are made in these areas. And that they need to mobilize and organize themselves in these letter writing campaigns to the governor, to the board of trustees. All of their email addresses can be easily found online, as well as to the president, chancellor, and provost.
If they don't listen, what then? What's it going to take to? I guess are we headed for a replay of the '60s when students were occupying administration buildings and that there were major disruptions on college campuses all across the country?
I hope not. But I do think that students and faculty and graduate students, I think we all have to join up in this endeavor. It needs to be a concerted push to reclaim the credibility of this institution on behalf of the students and in support of the students. But it requires faculty and students coming together in these efforts. The alumni also have an important role to play in all of this. All of these various constituencies need to be vocal and active in reclaiming the rights of the institution, and in particular in academic freedom on campus.
Very good. So, David, any final words out there for the folks listening at home?
No, stay tuned. We're not done yet. We're still working hard to try and save this institution.
You have an online presence where the folks can find you?
Well, absolutely. Anyone interested in engaging with AAUP directly, the IUB AAUP website is easy to find. There we have all of our statements, our resources. We also have ways in which you can get involved. That would be the best way for anyone interested to learn more about these issues.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for all that, and thanks for fighting for the soul of this university. I, as an alumnus, appreciate it for one. David McDonald, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Once again, that was Dr. David McDonald, a professor of folklore and ethnomusicology at IU and a Bloomington chapter president of the American Association of University Professors. As an alumnus and IU supporter, the attacks on my alma mater's independence and academic freedom both horrify and disappoint. Students, faculty, grads, and boosters alike must come together and forcefully demand the expulsion of President Pamela Whitten, the installation of a new and independent Board of Trustees, and a return to shared governance at all of Indiana's public colleges and universities, lest these institutions be tarnished for a generation. I have a lot more thoughts on this subject, and time permitting, I hope to push out an essay on the topic in the next week. But for now, I'll let you go. Come see me this weekend on Project Next Media Network's YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch streams, where I host Who's Left This Week, Indiana's most thorough Sunday morning news and politics talk show. Check it out live if you get a chance. It's a lot of fun if you can call following the news in this timeline fun. I bring together a diverse group of panelists from the Democratic Socialist left to never Trump conservatives, and we look at the week's headlines from around Indiana and beyond. We'll also take time to examine one big thing, a different deep dive every week. I hope to see you there in the comments, but if you can't make it live, the program will be available as a podcast Sunday afternoon. Thanks again to Professor McDonald for his time and his dedication to his students, to the pursuit of truth, and to academic freedom. His latest book project, Festival Activism is out on October 7th. Check it out. I'll also ask one last time for you to check out a paid subscription at whosleft.us, where you'll find my entire archive. I rely solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. In addition to the website, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, X, TikTok, Mastodon, and YouTube at Who's Left. Direct message me at any of those sites with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me at scott@whosleft.us. Finally, please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.